Hello and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kaustri. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in economic analysis and future affairs. Today on Future Affairs, we discuss Integrated Water Resources Management, or IWRM. Well, firstly, to contextualize the urgency of IWRM in Malaysia, 2 days ago, the doomsday clock, which symbolizes how near humanity is to destruction, has been moved 1 second forward to 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been since its inception in 1947. Now, the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, BAS, which sets the clock annually, stated that climate change is among key factors for this 1 second change, in addition to nuclear threats, potential misuses of advances in biology and artificial intelligence. Additionally, the State of Global Water Resources report released by UNESCO in October 2024 highlights severe stress on global water supplies, with 5 consecutive years of below normal river flows and reservoir inflows. This shortage is affecting communities, agriculture, and ecosystems. With 3.6 billion people globally currently facing water shortages, projected to exceed 5 billion by 2050, the report underscores the urgent need for action to meet Sustainable Development Goal 6 on water and sanitation. Now, zooming right into localized issues, IWRM in Malaysia is facing significant challenges due to rising urbanization, climate change, as well as outdated infrastructure. As of 2024, the country's water demand is projected to increase by 3 to 5% annually, primarily driven by urban growth and agricultural needs. 60% of treated water is lost through leakages, and water pollution continues to affect key rivers, with only 53% of our rivers meeting acceptable water quality standards. Santiago, Chairperson with the National Water Services Commission, SPAN, joins me live now in the studios to discuss integrated water resources management via actionable strategies. Charles, a very good morning. Welcome to studios.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So, Charles, just to get started off, let's frame what we are going to be discussing, which is, of course, the neglect of water resource management and infrastructure maintenance in Malaysia, as well as some of the core areas which SPAN has been playing in advocating for stronger regulatory frameworks so that we can move forward with more positivity towards not just 2030, but eventually 2050.
I think let me begin by saying that the water sector is a very challenged sector at this time. And as you point out in the introduction, it is largely through climate change, where the levels of uncertainty needs to be factored in at every point. You will have so much of rain at some point, and then for the next 6 months, you'll have no water.
Exactly.
This is something that is not only experienced in other countries, but also in Malaysia, though. But coming back to the ecosystem in Malaysia, the way water is organized, the Suruhanjaya Perkhidmatan Air Negara, or the Water Services Commission of Malaysia, the function is to regulate all the licensees, that is throughout the country, throughout the Peninsular Malaysia.
Yes, Peninsula, that's right.
It doesn't include Sabah and Sarawak. So it's basically a peninsular affair. That's number one. Number two, but the actual management of water depends on the state. We can only regulate.
Correct.
Through a business plan and through other regulatory framework, but the actual management is done by the state. And the state is the one that determines, what do you call it, how it's organized and how much money they're going to invest in infrastructure and so on and so forth. So it is a state matter, though, and that disconnect has to be dealt with at some point soon. And that's number one. Number two, you also have other government agencies that are also involved in the water ecosystem, if you want. So you have the DOE, the Department of Environment.
That's right.
You have the what do you call the Badan Kawal Selian Negeri. It means every state have their own regulator as well. That is the Badan Kawal Selian Negeri. And then you also have the Jabatan Bekalan Air in the state itself. So you have JPS involved as well. So you have Jabatan Pengairan and Saliran also involved. So you have DOE, you have JPS, you have JBA, and local councils together with the state regulator as well, and the state water operator as well. So this is actually what makes up the water ecosystem. And that is why it's important that all of the entire ecosystem works together, is well coordinated, so that people can get their water, industries can get their water, and our restaurants can have sufficient water, not only for today, but for the next 5 or 6 years, though. For the, as planning requires, and also for the long term. Now, there are many challenges to this. There are many challenges, and let me just quickly explain. One is the challenge of climate, the uncertainty of the climate. Now, this is very real. This is very real. We should keep in mind that 81% of our drinking water comes from rivers.
That's correct, which is why when, of course, any kind of river pollution incidents occur, that immediately leads to shutdowns of the potable water supplies.
Yes. So 81% comes from rivers, but 19% comes from dams, and the rest is underground water. But the reason why I say 81%, that is the most important, that's the most strategic resource, because it depends on the weather.
Very true.
If there's no rain, there is no water in the river. And if there's no water in the river, you and I will be challenged. Our industries will be challenged. So that is why we really have to start looking at the rivers very carefully. Today, our rivers have been highly compromised as a result of the massive pollution that affects the river, and actually it destroys the ecosystem. So when it destroys the ecosystem of the river, the climate change together with climate change, then the carrying capacity of the water carrying capacity begins to drop, begins to drop of the river itself. And also, our span studies are also showing that the yield from the river to the treatment plants are also dropping.
That's also of great concern, naturally.
Absolutely. So the weather triggers, the change in the weather patterns, the uncertainty of the weather triggers a whole variety of changes that we have to factor in. So that is why I think it is going forward, we need to put the rivers together with the management of water as one ecosystem. They cannot be separated into two anymore. This is what is happening in other countries as well. So we look at the rivers, and we look at management of water on land, and frame it as one ecosystem. This is the way that we need to go forward to manage the disconnect that we have now. That's number one. Number two, our operators, as I said, bulk of the bulk of management of water largely lies with the state. And the states have their own operators. In Selangor, we have IS Selangor. In Penang, you have PBA Pulau Pinang. In Kedah, you have SADA. So you have all of the operators. Now, some of the operators are okay, but the bulk of them have problems, and therefore they make losses. One of the reasons why they make losses is because the tariffs are very low.
Correct.
It has been consistently low for the longest period of time. Last year, the government made an effort to push the tariffs slightly up, but despite it increasing, there is not enough money for them to stay afloat. So therefore, the ability to repair infrastructure, the ability to replace pipes, all becomes a problem because they don't have the funds. And when there's a disruption, money goes to solve that disruption. So therefore, the society has to start looking at water as something that belongs to them. Water is theirs. It belongs to the people, though, and therefore they need to support it. They need to support the local water operators, especially when it comes to consumption of water as well as paying for the water. I think this is quite important. And the other problem that's linked to lack of funds is the high levels of non-revenue water.
That's right. About 35% or so of water in the system is non-revenue water. So
yes. So the losses are quite high. 35, I think the average is 35 to 37 across the country. But there are some particular states which are quite high. It goes up to 60%. Now, what this means is for every $100, you're losing $60. And these are processed water.
And in addition to the fact that 60% of treated water is lost due to leakages.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So that means you're processing 100 liters of water, 60 is going down.
That's right.
So when it goes down, it's lost. So that means you've lost 60,
sunken costs, basically.
Yeah, you have lost 60 ringgit compared to the 100 ringgit. So you only have 40. So you need to reduce the NRW.
That's right.
So what we have done at SPAN, let me give you some numbers on this though. Between 2018 and 2022,
right,
we have lost something like 8 billion ringgit worth of non-revenue water.
That's staggering. Not even a period of 5 years.
Yeah. So, and this is climbing, it's getting bigger and bigger. So therefore, what we have done is we have done two things. One, we have set up a joint committee between SPAN and also in one particular state, Perlis, Syarikat Air Perlis. So we just signed the agreement, and our technical team visited Perlis 2 times in order to structure out what we can do to help the local operator to enhance productivity, to enhance profitability, and then at the same time operational efficiency, and also to reduce NRW.
Right.
And from the feedback that we have got, we can actually reduce a good amount of NRW in the next year and a half if you follow the plan that has been worked out. And that can save Air Perlis something like 7 to 8 million ringgit. So we have changed the approach compared to before. Before, entire responsibility was given to the operator. Now we have a joint committee. And the joint committee, is more accountable. It's accountable to SPAN, to their own states, as well as to Petra, the ministry involved in managing water in the country. So in this way, we are trying to identify at the local level what exactly we can do.
More localized initiatives so that you can actually stop the domino. Right.
Exactly.
So thank you very much for that really comprehensive overview, Charles. Now, speaking of the domino effect, now another mix that has been added into the overall ecosystem for water consumption of late, and specifically in the past 2.5 to 3 years, has been the huge rise in the number of data centers and hyperscale data centers, which have cropped up across Malaysia, given the fact that we are quite blessed with plenty of natural resources. But what are some of SPAN's concerns when it comes to effectively integrating water resource management, particularly for key states such as Selangor, as well as Johor, which has currently more than 50 data centers on the plans?
Yeah, I think one has to keep in mind data centers are important for the development of a digital economy.
For sure.
So, therefore, we have to recognize the importance of data centers, but we also have to recognize that it has to be sustainably managed, the data centers. And why should they be sustainably managed is because they are guzzlers of electricity, energy, and they're also guzzlers of water.
As the cooling agents.
Yeah. So you need water. The amount of water you need would depend on the amount of energy that is being required. So the issue of hyperscales that you are mentioning, hyperscales can be anywhere between 700 megawatts to 1,000 megawatts, which means that they will require something like 6 to 7 Olympic-sized swimming pool amounts of water on a daily basis. So if you have, there's a plan, I've read in the newspapers, there's a plan for in one area in Johor to have 3 or 4 hyperscales. And just by reading it, it tells you, hey, this doesn't sound right. Because water has to go to households, water has to go towards local industries, to local restaurants, to local shops, local warungs, and so on and so forth.
Naturally, plus household usage.
Exactly, for households. So the question is, if there is a crisis, if there is a drought period for 6 months, all of this can happen. So therefore, we need to factor them as part of planning before you actually give approvals for these data centers. And we are starting, and I must emphasize, in the most unsustainable way. We are using potable drinking water. In other countries, when it comes to data centers, the requirement is you have to use 50% rainwater harvesting and another 50% reclaimed water.
Right, which does not interfere at all with the potable.
Exactly. But we are starting with potable drinking water. So that's why it's important that before a development order is given at the local council, there must be clear stipulations that in 3 to 5 years, you need to transit from potable to reclaimed water as well as to rainwater harvesting.
And of course, the fact that raw water supply needs to be adequate before any more permits can be considered at all.
And you also can use stormwater approaches and so on and so forth.
Sure.
Now, the catch is here. You have to install rainwater harvesting as part of the building, as part of the construction of the building, not as an afterthought once the building is already up.
Sure.
You can't do that.
That's like working backwards, right?
Exactly, exactly. So when I spoke to some of the big players in rainwater harvesting, they are getting approaches from the data centers after halfway through the building construction. So they're saying this cannot work. It must start from day one, and therefore it must go hand in hand. But this is where the local councils have to advise data center companies, especially the all these developers who are developing these data centers, that they have to use rainwater harvesting together with reclaimed water. And I think they also have to ensure that, like what Selangor is doing, for example, zero discharge policy. So
that's a good start, at least.
Very good. So Selangor will bring it. I think this year they'll implement it. I think Johor also has to do it. So I think basically what we are looking at is we are looking at data centers developing in 2 water-stressed states. And I think given the importance of the industry, given the importance of data centers in a digital economy, we need to ensure that it is sustainable. It is sustainable. So this is where local councils, before the permits are given, have to ensure A, B, C is there. And I think the way to start it, you have to have an environmental impact assessment.
Absolutely.
And so a noise impact assessment. Because some of these are big, they make so much of noise. So when it's located near homes, near complex building complexes and so on, it will impact on other surrounding areas. So you need to go through that exercise. Although it is encouraged, but it's not mandated. So I think it's time to mandate it. It also needs to mandate it.
Exactly, and particularly with the revelations of DeepSeek AI, for example, perhaps we will be reviewing and revisiting the necessity for so very many data centers, especially hyperscale. So thanks for that, Charles. Now moving back into looking at some wider issues that are impacting the water ecosystem. Now we have urban water demand and increasing frequency of droughts, but at the same time, SPAN is also involved in addressing the challenges related to over-extraction of groundwater, because groundwater in key Malaysian states, that is not also the way to go when it comes to ensuring adequate potable water supply, right? What are the long-term risks that we face if this is overlooked and accelerated groundwater extraction does continue?
I think there's only one state that actually uses groundwater in a very big way. That's the state of Kelantan.
That's right.
And I think the state of Kelantan, together with the ministry, has to develop a plan. Has to develop a plan in order to ensure potable drinking water becomes the main form of water consumption as opposed to underground water. There are challenges to using underground water, partly because of the chemicals involved. Like for example, in some parts of in Tamil Nadu, India, they use huge amounts of underground water. Now, what happens is seawater is now moving into those areas because they have not been they are not being used anymore. And after the tsunami that took place a couple of years ago, there's a trend in Tamil Nadu, for example, where seawater is now moving into the
aquifers,
which is compromises aquifers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Compromises aquifers. So that means the water becomes polluted. And it's no longer safe for consumption. So I think it's time to transition away from depending on underground water or groundwater and depend more on potable drinking water.
And I would say also another ongoing climate impact challenge is the fact that our meteorological department surveys show that particularly in states using some groundwater such as Kelantan, even Kedah and Terengganu, droughts have also increased in frequency by up to about 40% in just the past few years. So again, it brings us back to the fact that it needs to be attended to quite immediately. Now, in your capacity as SPAN chairperson, Charles, you've also consistently highlighted the importance of sustainable water management. So what are some of the opportunities that exist in 2025 and hopefully can be set in place so that we are well placed moving into 2030?
I think water should be seen as a national security priority.
Absolutely.
It should be perceived as a national security priority, and every effort has to be made to ensure that there's water security at all times, and that our households, our factories, our industries, agriculture and so on and so forth have sufficient water for the longest period of time. Now, this is a challenge, partly as we talked about, because of climate. And when climate comes, there's no control of this. Energy, you know how much of energy you have. But water, you can never say for certain, partly because the weather uncertainties.
True.
So therefore, we need to plan in such a way. And I think if you actually elevate water to the highest level, national security priority, then necessary resources will go to address water issues. So for example, we are talking to some of banks, for example, in order to support non-revenue water, to help solve the problem, to address the problem of non-revenue water.
At the root itself, yeah.
Yes. And there are also some discussions about, adding 3 cents or 2 cents towards our bills, so that money also can be used, water bills I mean here, that can also be used to support or reduce non-revenue water, but also to maintain the infrastructure that we need to maintain going forward, given the issues of climate. So we need, and for example, it's like this though. You look around this building, everything this building has got water in it.
Absolutely.
Our clothes, for example, every jeans, it requires about 3,000 liters for every jeans, 3,000 over liters though. I have the number here. Let me get the number to you.
Absolutely.
It is 3,781 liters for your jeans.
One pair.
One pair of jeans. And then for every, coffee, every cup of coffee is 140 liters that we have. And the building, you need water for the building. So water is so important
and
to
so
our
integral,
life,
yeah.
to our reproduction of society and so on. But where is water in terms of priority? At the lowest level. So we need to elevate it to the highest level and also get the necessary funds and support to ensure that water will last with us for the next 100 years, for example. That's the way we should approach it. We should say this is the national security priority, and I think this is something that we should do. And maybe we should impress our Prime Minister to consider water as a national security
a national priority, absolutely, especially given the fact that despite the challenges that we see on the flip side of continued intermittent flooding, that is also emblematic of the way in which water scarcity is set to become an issue in Malaysia by 2025, which is this year, since our actual water supply actually falls below the 1,000 cubic meters threshold.
Sure.
And according to, of course, the United Nations, this is a critical level. So moving on into trying to evaluate the entire discussion so far, and especially looking at access to clean water in areas which are outside of the urban sprawl. Let's look at rural areas and some of the challenges which have been ongoing and which you hope that SPAN's framework is going to help the state authorities address in the coming year.
Before answering the question, let me just backtrack, and I think it's something that we have to address though. This is the consumption of water on a daily basis. For example, today per capita consumption of water per Malaysian is 226 liters per person. 226.
That's significant,
liters.
yes.
That's huge, and that is so unnecessary, right? What we need is only 160 liters per person, but we're consuming 100 more. So this is something that we have to address. So we need to ensure that we need to conserve.
A mindset shift, really.
So parents should be telling the children. Schools should be promoting the idea of water conservation. Factories should start recycling in the name of conservation, though. This is something that has to be done. In Spain, we have changed track a bit, though. Normally, you always speak to the parents to speak to the children, or you speak to the older community to speak to the younger ones. We have said that's the wrong strategy. Now we are saying, let the children speak to their parents, though. Let the children ask the parents.
A social control, right?
Yeah. So the child goes to the house and says, "Why are you wasting water? Why are you not recycling water at home? Why are you washing your car every day? Is there a necessity to wash your car every day on top of that car exposure to the rain?" So I think when children start questioning, then the parents might change, though. The older people might change.
Fair enough.
So I think the strategy has to change.
Because we've got to try all approaches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have started a campaign now in Spain for the next 6 months, where we're going to go to schools and we're going to educate children to ask the question of how are we going to conserve water in the schools as well as at home, so that the message can be sent to parents, to their brothers, bigger brothers, older brothers, and so on, that water needs to be conserved. And we have to have this notion that water belongs to people, though, and therefore we need to conserve it as if it belongs to us. So when we have, we have a favorite pet, for example, we take care of the pet. We make sure it goes to the hospital. We go to, we
take care of all its needs.
And when the cat or the dog is upset or the horse is sick, it's like almost we are sick, though. That's how we have to feel about water.
Water supplies.
That's how we have to look at water, because it belongs to us. You lose it, you don't get it anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah. So about those who do not get it, though, I'm coming back into the question I was referring to earlier, Charles. Basically, your SPAN report from 2021 is actually saying that about 30% of rural households in Malaysia are still facing challenges and unreliable access to clean water. So some of SPAN's thoughts moving forward for the year ahead.
I think a most part of that number actually could be Sabah and Sarawak. I think Peninsular Malaysia, we have 99% or 98%
penetration,
access to water, and and specific to water, maybe in the case of rural areas, is the Ministry of Rural Development. It comes under them.
That's right.
It doesn't really come under SPAN's oversight. Our oversight is basically on states and not on ministries. So therefore, they too have their own water programs as well. So maybe it's time need to look at that more carefully.
Absolutely. And now, when SPAN's role in regulating water privatization has also come under challenge in recent years, particularly in light of your concerns about detrimental effects of privatized water services on affordability as well as accessibility for low-income Malaysians. So what could perhaps be the solution as we move forward over the next 5 to 10 years with those slight increases to up to 10 to 15%, but ensuring access for our especially B40 communities?
Malaysia's water, by and large, is not privatized. There's only one state that privatizes it, which is actually Johor. So there is a contract between the state of Johor and Renhill. So that is the only one that's privatized. The other one is corporatized. That's in Penang. But besides that, the remaining states, they come under their own states. So they are publicly owned as such. But they are very sensitive to price increases. All the states are very sensitive to price increases, especially involving water, because it is a human right. So therefore, we have to ensure water in an affordable way for everybody. At the same time, to ensure that the operators are efficient and sustainable, financially sustainable as well. At this time, most of the operators are not financially sustainable.
So that is the key and the be and the end all. Charles, thank you so much for your insights in so far, and I think it's been an absolutely insightful session on integrated water resource management. Well, that's all we have time today on Niaga Spotlight, featuring Charles Santiago, Chairperson for the National Water Commission Association. We will join you again next week on Friday. I'm signing off now. Tamina Kaushi. We'll see you again next week with more economic analysis and insights.